All right, guys, so we're going to factor when a is not equal to 1. So this is the harder case. We are going to still use the x to help us find our factors, but we're also going to have to use the box to kind of help organize our work and get our final answer, okay? So the first thing that you're going to do is multiply your a times c together, find those factors that add to b, and then after you find those, you're going to go to your box. So the first box has your x squared term from your problem. Same with your constant. Your constant is going in the last box, so that is from the problem. And then you're going to put those two factors in and you'll find the GCF of every row and column. Okay, now if you have a negative number in your box, so like this and this, you're going to have a negative GCF out there. So just be conscious of that. If you look at that first example, so we have 6x squared minus 17x plus 5. So this is our A, our B, and our C. So we're going to multiply A times C together. It has to add to B. So my A is 6x squared times 5. That gives me a 30x squared. We have to have a negative 17x because that was our B term. Okay, so in this case, remember, Desmos can do this work for you. You just have to do 30 divided by x and then negative 17 minus x, and it'll give you an intersection. So right there's one of the intersections. It's at negative 2, negative 15. So those are my two factors. So I'm going to say negative 2x and negative 15x. Negative 2x times a negative 15x gives me a 30x squared, and negative 2x plus a negative 15x gives me a negative 17x, okay? So I'm ready to go to my box now. So this first box is that first x squared term from your problem. So 6x squared. The last box is your constant. So my constant was 5. The only thing I'm taking from my x are my two factors that I found. So I would say negative 2x, negative 15x. Okay? So now you're trying to find the GCF of each row and each column. So if I look at these two, I cannot put a negative number in the GCF. So when I go to Desmos, all I'm going to do is put GCF, and then we had 6 and 2. So 6 comma 2 is 2. So I could pull a 2 out. Now, the next thing, we have some x's in there. So remember when we talked about GCF, you're taking the smallest number of x's out. So I had x squared with that first box and just 1x with the second box, so I can only take 1x out. Now, if you look at this next row, we have negative 15x and we have 5, okay? So the first thing I notice is that's a negative box, so I need to come out and just put a negative out there. We have 15 and 5, so if I find the GCF of 15 and 5, it gives me 5. So I can pull a 5 out. All right, same with my columns. So if I move on, I can do these first two. So we got 6x squared and a negative 15x. I need to plug in to Desmos to find that GCF. The GCF of 6 and 15 would be 3. So I can pull a 3 out. And then I can pull 1x out because that's the smallest number of x's that I have between those two. Now, my very last one, okay? So we have negative 2x and 5, okay? The first thing I noticed is this is a negative box, so I need to pull a negative out. And then between 2 and 5, when I plug that GCF in, I get 1, so I can pull a 1 out. Okay? So the things that are on the outside of your box are your factors. So this 2x minus 5 is a factor. This 3x minus 1 is a factor. And that would be your final answer. Now, the way that you can check these is, remember when we did multiplication? We had our box, but it was empty. So we multiplied what was on the outside and we wrote down what it gave us on the inside. So 3x times 2x gives me 6x squared. 2x times negative 1 would give me a negative 2x. So you can multiply what's on the outside and just double check that it actually gives you what you wrote down on the inside. If it does, then you know you did it correct. If it doesn't, then you need to go back and look at your work. Okay? We're going to look at this next one. So we got 3y squared plus 13y minus 10. I need to do a times c, and it gives me b, okay? So a times c would be a 3y squared times a negative 10. It has to give me 13y. Well, 3 times a negative 10 gives me a negative 30y squared. So in Desmos, I'm going to go and say negative 30 divided by x, 13 minus x, and see what my intersection is. That's a negative 30. So if I zoom out, I get 15 and negative 2, okay? So that's going to be my 2 factors, okay? So at that point, now I'm ready to go to my box. Remember, the first term of your box is your y squared term. So we had 3y squared. My last term is that constant from my problem, so negative 10. The only thing I'm taking from this box, or from this x, and moving to my box is my 2 factors. So I have 15y and negative 2y. So now I'm taking the GCF of each row and each column. So if I start with this first row, 3y squared and 15y, the GCF, all I have to do is say GCF 3, 15, and I get 3 out. So I have 3. I also can take 1y because that's the smallest number of y's that I have. If I go to the next row, so the first thing I notice is that first box is a negative, so I need to come put a negative out there. The GCF between 2 and 10 would be 2. I also cannot take any y's out because 10 doesn't have any y's to give me. All right. If I look at my column, so my first column would be this 3y squared and this negative 2y. The GCF between 3 and 2 would just be 1, and I could bring a y out. And then the very last one, so we have 15 and negative 10. The GCF between 15 and negative 10 would be 5. And then I cannot take any y's out because the 10 doesn't have any to give me. Okay, so now I'm at the point I just got to write it in factored form. My factors are what is on the outside of my box. So this 3y minus 2, this 1y plus 5. Okay, so, and you can check, remember, multiply what's on the outside, see if it gives you what's on the inside. Okay.